Good morning, Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. up at the waterfall at New Lanark. Kind of clammy morning this morning. It's a bit hot. Good morning, Mr. Laverty. How are you? Hope you're well. We're up at Bonington. A wee deflection of home, Mr. Laverty. The homecoming. Good morning, Corella. Good morning, everybody. Just take a wee couple of minutes, see who hops on, we can get going. And my big tree up there. Morning, Harv. Good morning. Morning, Harvey. The body's getting sore, buddy, but we're raring to go. So, good morning. Good morning. Here we are. Good morning, Anne. Good morning, everybody. Tuesday morning. Vlogging. My new norm. So, how big's your hole? I thought that was quite a good name for this morning. How big's your hole? So yesterday and the subsequent series of blogs that we've done before here. Morning, Anne. So, how big's your hole? What do I mean by that? So, in Buddhism, there is a saying of a realm, a psychic realm that's called the Hungry Ghosts. A wonderful writer, speaker, seminar leader, and leading doctor in the field of addiction, a guy called Gabor Mate. He's wrote a book called Feeding the Hungry Ghost. And what I want to talk about this morning is how big is your hole? How big is the hole inside you? Now, whether we're talking about alcohol, cigarettes, chocolate, eating, material things, belongings, feelings. There's a lot of categories of things that human beings are using as an attempt to try and fill your hole, right? So, when you're caught, or when we're caught in desire, we never feel fulfilled. You know, one drink's too much and 2 bottles isn't enough. And we're living in a society and a system which, for me, this is only me talking, me blethering about my thoughts, rightly or wrongly. We're living in a society, a system that's failing us miserably. And I saw a friend of mine in America, a namesake as well, Mr. Hislop, had put on a post that I read this morning that was something like, there's 1,700 pages in our legal documents because humanity can't follow 10 simple commandments for a tablet made of stone. And society today, when we look at statistics of people, young people especially, morning Francis, morning Willie, good morning everyone. The name this morning is How Big's Your Hole, right? And how are you filling that hole? So, the societal system that we live in preys on the human experience, the vulnerability, because this feeling of never being enough, of not feeling complete, a series of feelings of not being whole, never feeling whole until I get that next thing. I'll be happy when I get that. That'll give me this feeling. So we've got, you fly on the side of my head. We've got a system that seems to be failing humanity. When we look at it in addiction, we look at it in mental health. Mental health is going through the roof. And friends of mine go, oh Ross, you know, it's because that's what you look at. You know, not everybody's an addict. I disagree. I have met very few people in this life that I can look at and think they're content. Contentment in someone is a person that's able to sit in this world, a world that's full of temptations, desires, wantings, and a person that's okay and can accept that they have a craving, a need, a hole within their soul that they attempt to fill with whatever that may be. Now, yesterday I used a line that said, what would it be like for you if alcohol's your deal, right? If alcohol's the thing that you're drinking, let's say it's red wine. So imagine a couple of bottles of red wine in front of you, or your case that you get delivered weekly, whatever, right? And you imagine that I just came along and said, right, I'm going to take this away from you. And what I'm going to ask you to do is look at what that feels like. What does it feel like when I take this away from you and say, you can't have any more of that, right? Are you filled with a feeling of dread? Does it feel as if you've just lost a family member? Does it feel as if you've just lost one of your kids? Right? So the degree to which you feel that is to the degree of the hook that you have into it. The hook that you have into it is the level of which you're attached to it, right? So back to, we've spoke about this stuff in the past, but I'll re-go over it very briefly. Attachment. When we start to look at early years attachment, all children are born into this world with a primitive need for attachment. Bonding, where they look to be mirrored, the goo-goos and the gagas and the giggles that are reciprocated between caregiver and child, give the child a sense of mirroring that gives them a sense of self, okay? So early attachment, if you are interested in that sort of stuff, there are many great authors on it, many great behavioural psychologists and psychologists that have looked at it. I would recommend that you start with Bowlby. Okay, so attachment theory and attachment disorders, etc, etc, etc. Now, there was a study done many years ago with chimpanzees. I can't remember if it was Sapolsky or not. Perhaps it was Robert Sapolsky on attachment within chimps, attachment disorder within chimpanzees, right? And there was an experiment done with a chimp that was starved of attachment in its earlier years from its caregiving mother, okay? And then it was followed throughout its life. That chimp displayed higher tendencies of aggression and also binge eating, right? So a little chimpanzee displayed hostility, aggression, and it would binge eat. So where our attachment needs are not met in those earliest years of development, right? Now, that could be on a very negative that your parent was emotionally unavailable through drugs or alcohol. Your parent was emotionally unavailable because of untreated postnatal depression. It could be that as a child in your earliest of development, your primary needs were not met by your caregivers. So then what happens is you then have this primitive need for attachment, and you will attach to anything because we're programmed, we're hardwired to attach to something outside of ourselves. And Apple, very cleverly, have created a device that's almost a mirror image of how our brain works and thinks, how the programs and the thoughts in our brain come down, get moved to the side, get swept away, etc, etc. Now, Apple were very, very clever with this in the early years of them developing computer systems, and it was the MacBook Pro. If you remember back to that, when you shut the lid over along the front where you push the button to bring the lid up, there was a little sort of white light, and that little white light used to pulsate. Do you know that they had the algorithm of that light set up to be completely in tune with a human body? Right? It was like a heart beating. So in the corner, non-consciously, subconsciously, you would be sitting and your computer would be pulsing in the corner, which would create a level of attachment to that device, right? Super clever. Now, back to how big is your hole, right? How big's the hole that you've got inside of you? Do you ever feel satisfied? Are you filled with desire? Is the craving that's within you, whatever it is, moderate or extreme? And are you starting to question each time you do a behaviour that you wish you could stop it, but you've now got yourself into a compulsion with it, and it's just replicating? Now, in Buddhism, there's the suffering realm where we suffer as long as we've not managed to look at and deal with this hungry ghost that's within us, this hole that we have within us. Now, if you can identify with what I'm saying, I would encourage you to seek out, as I've said, there's many psychologists, psychiatrists, there's mental health charities out there that are willing to help, okay? But the first step is always starts with you. It starts with accepting. It starts to accept that you've got this deep-rooted pain, fear of not belonging, fear of missing out, fear of never being good enough, that you're not good enough, right? All these psychological stamps tie in effectively to the level of the hole that you've got inside you, the level of the hungry ghost, right? There's a saying in AA, one drink makes you feel like a new man. When you feel like a new man, you want another drink. And it's that habitual cycle that we get into of trying to constantly fill it. Now, as I was saying, I personally think that the way that we have managed addiction is getting better now, but we've been doing it absolutely wrong, and we're failing miserably. If you look at the amount of people, just look at the amount of people that's taking antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication. Children as young as 9 are taking anti-anxiety medication. Our levels of suicide are through the roof. Our level of disharmony is absolutely through the roof, right? So what would that look like? What would that look like now? Back in the early days, where there was still a gaping hole, people turn around and say, well, church filled that gap in the community. But when you look back at church, or what I understand of it, it was just a place where you could go and be repented for beating up your wife the night before, or drinking too much, or spending all your weekly wages from the shipyards on gambling or substances. The levels of domestic violence in Glasgow and west of Scotland, it's not a new thing. You know, this pandemic is showing the levels of domestic violence, and actual fact, domestic violence has went up. I disagree. Domestic violence has always been there, and what it's saying is now it's up. It's not that it's up, it's actually people are starting to notice it because the white noise has been taken to the side. The amount of people that are living and cohabiting with partners in marriages where they feel dissatisfied, where it's just two people like flatmates living in a house together, where there's a loss of connection, a loss of love. No matter how hard you try with your wife or your husband, you just can't seem to get through to them. So very quickly, when that love is not reciprocated, we pull it back and hold it back because it's so painful for us not to give that love to our partner. So let's look at how we manage addiction from a more inclusive standpoint, right? As I've said in previous talks, trauma. Now, all people that have been traumatised do not become addicts, that's true. But all people that are addicts have 100% been traumatised. So what is trauma? Trauma in its rawest form is a place where we've lost connection to ourselves. And as I was walking around here thinking about this morning, I remember a friend that shared a story around about their first sexual experience. And it was a sexual experience where they said no. They didn't want it to happen. And there was a mirror in the bedroom of which they experienced this daunting first sexual encounter, which would be daunting whether you are in agreement to it or not. This person fell into almost the mirror. And from that moment, they had a sense that they had lost a part of themselves that was suspended within the mirror that they had found refuge in. They had went into the mirror as if the sexual experience wasn't happening to them, and that the person that they were that was safe was in the mirror. And I think that's a wonderful metaphor. for the broken bonding and loss of connection that we have to something greater. And whether you're an atheist or you're a Christian or whatever, for me, we've really got to look at this. For me, I've got to look at this for me to understand it in my brain. That the earliest of trauma that we've all experienced is a loss of connection to our higher self, if you like. We call that in the fellowship our higher self. But you know, those little children that we've all held and bounced on our knee, they're goo-goos and gagas and laughters, and they transit from laughter to pain to suffering to tears to tantrums to laughter to tears. And then we become this shell almost, this corporate shell, this body, this personality that we have to present to the world. And that personality is 1,000 miles away from who we actually are. We become what society wants us to be, what our parents, what we've been steered towards. Are any of us actually doing the career that we chose, or are we doing it to fill some other kind of need, be that financial, or oh, well, my mother done that, or my dad done that, or I've just went into the family business, or I'm seeking approval because there's another thing that came to my mind, and this isn't, I've not just heard this once, but I can only speak about my buddy, a good friend of mine. She's a female. She had a sister, there was two of them, and her father, she had this from a very young age, felt guilty about being a woman because she wanted to be as good as any man, and used to sit and watch the Formula One racing with her father. And as a very young child, she knew that sitting as a girl watching the Formula One racing with her father was not because she wanted to watch Formula One, but she wanted to give her father a boy. She wanted to be as competent as any male, and then found herself in later life going into work in a male-dominated environment, right? And unfortunately for her, through conversations we've had over a kitchen table type thing, she can never receive, because she can never allow herself to be dependent on anything outside of herself, which has made her fiercely independent. Now, look at us, look at where we're doing that, look at where we are filling who we are with roles, with constructs, with a personality, in order to try and make us feel as if we belong, whereas inside we have this deep sense where we don't belong, where we're not good enough and will never be good enough. So starting to explore attachment and how we attach to alcohol, we attach to drugs, we attach to sex, we attach to gambling, we attach to TV, we attach to internet, we attach to smartphones. We even attach to healthier options like exercise or mountain biking or walking or whatever that might be. But how many of us are actually mindful in this moment, and we're in this present moment, and we're able to actually be with where we are right now? Because any time that we have a desire, we are living in the future, we're living in the past, we're angry about what happened to us before, we're worrying about money, we're worrying about what's coming next, we're worrying about what phase 3 is going to look like, what phase 2 is going to look like, we're worried about COVID-19 and all its 32 strains that might morph and mould into something different. We've now got a massive amount of fear in our system. We've got this protesting going on. And because we've been in lockdown for so long, people haven't been able to have an outlet for that let's be heard. And it's not that I disagree with Black Lives Matters, but I don't agree with it. For me, when I hear that Black Lives Matters, we're still seeing a culture other than our own as lesser than, because now we're having to fight for their rights. There doesn't seem to be any acceptance in that. And what's really lovely is there are a few people are starting to put up things like all life matters. And all life matters. All sentient beings matter. All plant life matters. Now, yeah, look what's happened to George Floyd. It's horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous. And that police officer that did it, and also the ones that stood back and watched, they're all guilty. But look at what we're doing to our own habitat. Look at what we're doing to where we live. Look at the rainforests that we're cutting down. Look at the way that we treat one another. Look at the gossips amongst you. Look at how many times this week alone you've judged somebody outside of yourself, or indeed shared something about someone that you had no right to share. Right? Now, oh, well, Ross, but that's not going to take their life. George Floyd's dead and he's never going to come back. But you just don't know if the level of toxicity, and that you've shared a secret about somebody to somebody else, that you don't know if that person's going to go home that night and scowl a bottle of whiskey and batter their wife. You don't know if that person's going to go home and take their life overdosing medication, or indeed go out and have to fill this void, because somewhere we've been part of creating that void because of the way that we're treating our fellow people in this world. Now, thinking about attachment, I'm jumping back and forward here, but how much we're attached to everything. So this morning, I'm walking down into New Lanark to start my walk, and remember one of the vlogs I spoke back about, there's two young guys that are into their physical exercise, and they meet up in the park and they're doing their lunges and their kettlebells and all the rest of it. Now, as I walked down, I saw their cars. I saw their two cars, and it filled me with a nice feeling. I'm going to see someone familiar. I'm going to see people that I value. I'm going to see people that I'm beginning to trust. I'm going to see people that's going to give me something. And it put a wee spring in my step. I walked past the park and they weren't there, right? And I noticed how inside my heart sank a little bit. I went, right, okay. Just started watching that, because my walk in the morning before I do my vlog is a form of mindfulness. I attempt to the best of my ability to not breathe through my mouth and only breathe in through my nose. And it's very, very difficult. And just be really mindful of my feet on the ground, right? So I'm watching my feelings. I'm watching this psychobiological experience going on that's inside my body. And I'm noticing that I felt a wee bit sad by that, because they people that were familiar weren't there, right? And then I'm walking round the walk, and I met up yesterday with a girl I went to school with briefly, and we've reconnected, and we went a walk yesterday, and I'm walking round the walk, and part of the walk there's these two seats, and she said, we'll take a wee seat here, will we? And I looked at that seat. Now, I pass this every morning, and I'm now going to pass this every morning, but why I'm telling you this is, I was enjoying the walk that I had with her yesterday. It gave me a sense of wholeness, completeness. There was a connection there that was great to share with somebody else, right? And for the majority of the time that we were walking round this loop, we were just nattering. But then she said, let's sit on these chairs and have a wee seat. And we sat on the chair, we watched this waterfall, and I put my feet up against the fence. And so I had this experience with the guys. I felt a wee bit empty. I was with that. I managed to sit with it rather than distract myself to it and go into what's that empty feeling about, because it's not the first time in my life that I felt that. It's just been shown to me. I was mindful of it. I sat with the feeling changed into something else and changed into something else until I eventually got more of a stem of it, which I'm not going to share publicly, but I worked away with that. And then as I'm walking through, I get to that chair and I look at them. They're two wooden chairs at the side of a footpath. And I just was filled with this warm feeling, this feeling of remembering yesterday and this positive experience. And then I attached to that thought, right? Now, I'm not saying that that's either good or bad, but what I'm saying is we're attaching to absolutely everything. We put meaning on absolutely everything at a very intrinsic level, more so than external substances of drugs, alcohol, sex, image, how we look, buying, shopping, clothes, right? The image that we present to the world, the having to have and never feeling fulfilled and never feeling good enough. And then what happens is we end up getting into a cycle of suffering where we might go and have a bottle of wine or a couple of bottles of wine, and then we end up waking up and we feel self-loathing. We absolutely loathe ourselves. So I'm going to take a moment and ask you a question. If it's drink or cocaine or some kind of compulsive behaviour that you're doing, my question to you is, when you've filled that hole, when you're trying to fill your hole with something, right, be that wine or shopping or buying a really expensive pair of shoes or whatever that might be, right, how many of you, after you've done it and it's came through the door, the box with the big expensive shoes on it that's slightly above your budget, or you've just drank a few bottles of wine, or you've just done in a half quarter of Coke, or whatever, you've went out and slept with a stranger, right, to try and fill your hole, right? How many of you wake up and hate yourself? Hate's maybe a strong word. How many of you wake up and have regret and wish you hadn't done it. So ask yourself that question, right? Because then what's happening is we're ending up into a double series of cycles. So the first one's suffering, and then we end up feeling guilty that we're no good enough, that we've made a mistake, that we've messed up, that we've hit the FUCK button and blew it all up again, right? And then we're moving into another level of it. And this is to the level of which we're trapped. We become trapped in our thinking. We become trapped in what we think gives us validation. We become trapped in substance and alcohol misuse. And we become trapped in withdrawal. Withdrawal. W-I-T-H-D-R-A-W-L. Withdrawal, right? And we start to withdraw and isolate from our environment because we have got such a distorted view of attachment, right? So what can you effectively attach to? Well, starting to make cleaner, healthier choices about what we attach to is a start. Awareness is a start. And for me, and this is only me, right? I'm no expert at this kind of jazz. I'm just coming from my own point of view, right? And sharing what little knowledge I have around about this. And even if it happens in silence and I never hear from you. But yesterday, Bin the Bevy, I got the most amount of private messages that I've ever had out of, what is it now, 78 vlogs that I've done. So there's something going on around Bin the Bevy that people are starting to ask questions. People are starting to look at their behaviour. People are starting to think, wow, right? And especially through lockdown right now, there's a massive amount of people suffering from anxiety. There's a massive amount of people suffering from afflictions and addictions, etc, etc, etc. So think outside the box for a wee minute. Think about something other than yourself. See, when you're posting posts that might cause somebody anxiety, think about it. See if you're posting pictures of alcohol when somebody might be sitting in the house and that picture triggers them to go and have a drink. Think about how you're interacting with your environment and how it would be for you. Now, how do I deal with that? It's hit the pause button. Sounds very like acceptance and commitment therapy, which is ACT, but it's more of a meditative mindfulness pause button. When you have a feeling and you're able to identify that feeling of emptiness and you can identify that you've got a hole, how big's that hole? How big's the niggle? How big's the itch, right? What I would encourage you to do is get into it. And meditation, you hear me banging on about it, meditation is an absolutely fantastic way to change your inner world, which in turn will change your outer world, right? So sit, get a sense of what the feeling is that's inside you and how you're trying to fill that void, trying to fill that hole. We've all got a deep-rooted pain inside us because we've lost somebody. We may have lost our parents. We may have lost a job. We may have lost our status. We may have lost a sense of ourselves through victimisation, through trauma in our childhood. Whatever it is, we're trying to fill a void, and we've created a personality because who we think we are and who we're walking about presenting to the world is a million miles away from who we actually are, because who we actually are is a very connected breed of people. We're social animals. We're here to do the job right. We're here to get here together. And in times of crisis, we see those personalities drop, and it doesn't matter if you're a CEO of a company, right, or you're on the dole. In times of crisis, the majority of people manage to get together and club together. But that's a joy that's easily forgotten. That's a pain that's very quickly forgotten, right? So, back to Rambling Ross, right? I will learn to keep myself on target, right? Mindfulness, meditation. Rather than trying to distract yourself with the feeling, we go in for a drink, going on eBay, going and buying something, going and fantasising about what it would be like and what you'd feel like if you were driving that car, getting yourself in debt, trying to buy yourself stuff that's out with your range of affordability. Been there, done that, not good. Now it's nice to just do it nice and slowly, right? Just had a car for 3 years there. Never had a car for 3 years in my life. Well, that's not true. Started with the one before that. I had that for 2 years. So in 5 years I've had 2 cars, right? 10 years ago I would have had 20 cars in 2 months. You know, just was never content. So bringing a degree of contentment into your life and taking those steps forward very slowly is an effective way to do it. But what I'm getting at is when you have a feeling, and for a lot of us those feelings are not yet conscious, they're still unconscious triggers. They're still an invisible trigger that something's happened somewhere in your environment, in your matrix, that's put a hook into your unconscious mind and stimulated a pain, a suffering, an emptiness, a not belonging, not being good enough feeling, right? It might have happened at 9 o'clock in the morning at work and you might not be aware of it, but something somewhere in that environment, even if it wasn't external, it might have been an internal thought that's happening at a non-conscious or unconscious level, and it's triggered you. And you've sat with this itching pain all day, but you've not known that you've got it because it's completely oblivious to us. And then what we do is we find ourselves driving to the off licence or phoning somebody and trying to get a half quarter of gear, right? Next thing we know, we're then in that self-destructive cycle of using and abusing the self, and we're using and feeling guilty, right? So let's get back to the point. Finish the point, and then you can finish up for the day and jog on. So, rather than trying to avoid the feelings that's inside us, welcome them in, bring the feelings in, right? Allow yourself to feel that guilt, that shame, that not belonging, and have the courage to sit with it and be with it. Because if you are able to do that, to the extent of which you're able to do that, is to the extent that that will it'll change. I was going to use a big fancy word there and couldn't pronounce it, right? It'll change into something different. Now that something different might not be a positive. It might be an even bigger negative than the pain that you were sitting with, right? And you sit with that. And again, we've got no way of knowing how it's going to move and change through the body. But if you are able to press pause and observe your thoughts and feelings, those thoughts and feelings, the more you're able to sit on them, they'll change into something different. The more courage that you have to be able to do that, just follow the money, follow the feeling. It'll end up bringing you back to a place of connection, back to a place of wholeness, because we're all fractured souls, and what we're looking for is connection. We all have a deep-rooted need for connection, right? And where there is lack of connection, there is broken bonding, and where there is broken bonding, we will attempt to fill that bridge with something that may be destructive to us. Now, it could be substances and alcohol, it could be overspending, it could be having an affair, it could be withdrawn from your relationship, it could be sitting there like two strangers on the couch, right? Both of you sitting on your iPhone, when in actual fact you look round at your wife and you're like, oh, wow, up the stairs, let's go. Right? And put a bit of joy and a bit of passion back into our lives. But we can never have that when we're deeply disconnected and feel completely raw. So, the question that I'm putting to those that are willing to ask that today is, how big's your hole? Right? How big's your hole? And how and what are you attempting to fill that with? Okay? I wish you a pleasant Tuesday. Have a great day. It's been a joy walking with you in the morning. And yeah, let's see what tomorrow brings. It's all good.